Hi and welcome to UFOs Australia. My name's Tim Grover. I'm really excited to introduce my next guest with you. Just before I do that though, I just wanted to say a really big thank you to Nexus Magazine for helping organise this. Now, if you haven't read Nexus Magazine, please do so. They're available in any good news agency in Australia. Now, I'd also like to mention their news service, which is their news feed service. So it's free to access, it's online, it's 24 hours a day, and there's no adverts. And what you can also do is actually tailor the news feed to your interests. So please support Australian Local. They're really nice guys there. As I mentioned, they helped organise this interview today with my guest, who I'm just about to introduce. So please support them, okay? Thank you. Without further ado, I'd just like to introduce my next guest. She's got so many credits to her name. I hope I get it right. So she was born in the UK. She's been over in Australia, up in Queensland. That's where she's currently residing. She worked as a midwife, a nurse, and a health educator. And since 1994, she's worked in private practice as a counsellor, a hypnotherapist, and a metaphysical teacher. She's also an author. Now, when I give you the book names, I'm sure this might give away who I'm speaking to today. So her books are Awakening and New Human. Now, she's also the founder and the principal of ACERN, which is the Australian Close Encounter Research Network. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about now. So I'd just like to give a really warm welcome to Mary Rodwell. Hi, Mary. How are you today?
Hi, Tim. It's good to talk with you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for giving me some of your time today. I got to say, I'm really thrilled, very excited to actually use some of your time. I've been a big fan for a long time, and I've been watching a lot of what you've been doing for a very long time now. So I'm just absolutely thrilled to have some time with you here. So the obvious question for those that may be quite new to this subject: you were a health educator, you're a midwife, you're a nurse, you're a counsellor. How did you get into researching UFOs?
Well, there was one thing about me that wasn't in there, is that if it was weird and wonderful, I was always interested in it. Right from a small child, you know, I've been a bit of a bookworm, and I was always interested in the mystery of life. What's it all about? Those big questions that we all ask. And what was great about counselling is that you get to meet people with all sorts of human experiences, you know, whether or not it's family issues and different ways of being brought up. But you know, people who'd lost somebody and then feeling their presence around them, for example. So the spirit world became very tangible because of who I spoke to. And primarily, it was 2 books prior to the first gentleman that walked through the door that told me he had experiences. There was no support groups. Most people think you're a loony, he said to me. And he lives in England now. His name is Ellis Taylor, and he lives recently near Oxford, and he's written his own books since then. But he said, look, I wake up with marks on my body, shaved areas. My partner has had experiences. The children have had experiences. The relatives won't come to the house because they think it's demons. And fortunately, I'd read 2 books, and one of them was Dr. John Mack, the former professor of psychiatry at Harvard University, who wrote the book Abduction: Human Encounters with Aliens. He came in as a skeptic, but after working with people, became convinced it was a reality. After psychological testing, he did everything really to check whether or not this was valid. Wrote Passport to the Cosmos as his second book before, sadly, he got killed in an accident in London. But that book, plus Whitley Strieber's book Communion, I read that. It was an experience. As you know, Whitley Strieber has written many books now. It's a classic of this whole encounter experience. So having read those, then a few weeks later, Ellis walking through the door, and it's like, oh, it looks like this might actually be real, because here am I now getting this gentleman who was articulate, middle-aged gentleman, obviously very intelligent. There was no way I ever suspected that he was making it up. There was no sense of that whatsoever. And what happened then was, after working with him, within a few weeks, somebody else walked through the door having these experiences. And then
So
I meet a social worker.
so did that person tell the other person, or it was just pure luck, do you think?
Oh, yeah, it was pure synchronicity,
Yeah.
coincidence, if you believe in coincidence.
Yep.
And one of the things I did do, because I was doing advanced counselling at the time at Wasley Institute, and I took his case study to this advanced counselling course because I thought either going to say, Mary, the guy's, crazy or whatever, but I felt it important to see what they would say. And what was fascinating is I took this, and there was social workers, even a uniting minister and whatever, all doing advanced counselling. And interestingly, almost all of them started to tell me about strange experiences they had, whether it's in a haunted house or something like this. And really, what it said to me is our modern psychology was not dealing with that vast extra kind of experience we call the paranormal, our multidimensional part of ourselves, our spiritual selves, whatever you want to call it, our psychic selves. It was not dealing with that. And I just thought, well, what's the point of that? I then did my own research after that. And that's how I created a CERN ultimately, because I wanted people to have a professional resource to come to if they were having anomalous experiences like this. I wanted them to know that, I could work with them professionally, but also I was open to all realities because it was pretty clear to me that there was so much I didn't know what I didn't know, or we
Yeah.
don't know what we don't know.
So that's quite a very, that's a very different direction to, I guess, the direction that most counsellors take. So I think, you're sort of, I guess you're groundbreaking. There's not many, I guess, hypnotherapists that actually go down this path. And I think a lot of that is to do with the UFO subject and I guess consciousness-based UFO subject, which I think is probably quite new to even those that have an interest in this field, let alone if you don't have an interest in this field. So I think it's just so important that this work is being done. So I think I'm right in saying it was the hypnosis and regressing people was probably the beginning of this work. And did you come across any really interesting cases that sort of stick out in your mind?
Oh, look, when people say, can you pick out certain cases? I could pick out dozens of cases that have been significant in my journey to understanding what this is all about. Because for most people, the mere fact that somebody remembers being on a spacecraft is pretty astounding, let alone the fact that they may have had a healing procedure where they were having a serious illness and they go on board spacecraft, they have a healing procedure, and then they're well and they're healthy and they're okay again. That's pretty outstanding.
Yeah.
There's even written on healing now.
Yeah.
Preston Dennett's wrote the book 100 Documented Healings that they've gone to the doctor. The doctor was saying, this is serious, we can't do anything, whatever. And they go up on a spacecraft, have a procedure, and the next day they're well. That's just one part of the astounding things that happen through these experiences.
And I can imagine that can be used as, I guess, scientific evidence. Literally one day they're sick, whatever that may be. Next day they're not sick. And then if there's really no explanation, but yet they're saying, I've had this experience. I mean, surely you would think that would be taken seriously. It's something that's a physical manifestation. I mean, this is, it's there. You can't argue it.
The whole point is that this subject scares a lot of people. It scares them because they really don't understand what's going on. If it's really going on, what does it mean in their lives? It means that everything in your life you've got to look at differently after knowing, after, as you say, seeing a spacecraft that's telling you there's perhaps life out in the cosmos, and you've never been exposed to that understanding before. Oh, what does that mean? It's not just a craft. There must be some intelligent life in that craft. So where are they from? How long have they been coming to this planet? What does that mean? And it means also that everything we've ever been taught is inaccurate, because if they've been visiting us all through history, where is their place in all of that? So for me, that's the journey that almost everyone who sees it spacecraft or comes into this has to reappraise everything they've ever learned, including myself. And not everybody wants to do that. So they'd rather say, no, I can't deal with that. So there's a huge amount of denial around it, even with those that know they've seen things. don't want to look at it, too hard, too scary, or whatever. But the truth is, the evidence out there is enormous. We've got hours of footage from military sources that you can see on the internet now, where you've got a fighter plane that's got footage of these craft. I mean, there's been disclosure from the Navy in the last few months where they were showing the Nimitz Tic Tac craft that were hundreds of them, and they've talked to the pilot saying, yes, we can't explain them. They were 1 minute there and they'd be gone in seconds. We can't explain that technology or whatever. We've got astronauts talk about what they've seen on the space station, for example. We've had presidents that have seen UFOs, like Carter, for example. We've had celebrities. We're talking about John Lennon talking about being on spacecraft, and other celebrities that have talked about their experiences. I know physicists, doctors, nurses, social workers, farmers, children of 5 and 6 years old that have talked about being on spacecraft. Are they all fantasizing? Or is this actually real? Come on.
Exactly right. And I think because the norm, right now that's not the norm to people's worldviews. That isn't the norm, but I think that's part of the reason why I have UFOs Australia, is to speak to people like yourself, speak to other people that have that actually research, go out and proactively do something about it. Because the more that we talk about it, the more normalized it's going to be, and then the more people, I think, will then again do their own research, or you're going to have all the lots of credible doctors who are also going out. When I interviewed Dr. Roger Stankovic, I think I made a comment, why isn't this taken seriously? And he said it is being taken seriously. There's lots of Stanton Friedman. I mean, he's a physicist, obviously incredibly intelligent guy. They're researching this stuff. They are researching it, so it's absolutely credible. And that's it. And the more we talk about it, the more normal it's going to be. And I think the more's going to happen in this space, essentially. And I think that's fantastic. But one of the things which I really loved, and I was talking, obviously, when we were having a bit of a chat earlier on, was when you do hypnotize people, essentially, and I know that you talk about it more, is you can proactively communicate with the entities when you're regressing some of your clients that have been hypnotized. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, yes, and a lot of people don't realize because they think that when you take somebody into a trance state and you take them to an experience where they may have had missing time, for example, and they see themselves being taken by the beings to a craft, they may see procedures being done. And certainly that validates, did I get taken? What happened on board craft? They may see various things being done and what have you. But people don't realize that you can actually get them to communicate in real time to those intelligences, that there is and this is really fascinating because it gives them answers. So they may see a procedure being done and thinking, oh my goodness, what are you doing to me? Well, you can actually then get them. There'll always be one of those intelligences. They can actually directly say to them, so what is this? Why are you doing this? And they will get in their head, because all of this is telepathic. Or we're needing to do this because you've been unwell, or we're needing to do this as an upgrade. And they will even, and I'm writing a chapter on the science of the soul at the moment, and in it, one of the things I want to say is what we're realizing is that we're not just a physical container. We have essence, soul, spirit, which is separate, but inhabits it. And this, one of the gentlemen that I was regressing onto the craft, and they said they're working on my brain. So they've moved my consciousness out of my brain so they can actually work on my brain.
Wow.
Now,
I think you've probably just blown a few brains just by saying that.
It certainly shows and demonstrates that our consciousness, the spirit, essence, soul, whatever name you want to give, the life force that we have, can be separate and independent of the physical container. And that is certainly something that we need to look at with all of this, because I've heard a few, when you're talking about unusual or really strange experiences where they will be aware that they are in a different form on board craft, and their human body is sort of to one side, and they're operating in another biological being. I remember one young lady telling me she's in a grey body on board craft working as a scientist. So I said, so where's your human body? And she said, oh, it's over there, like, waiting for me. And I said to her, so how do you get back to your human body? And she described this ball of light moving from the grey container, reanimating a human body, and then obviously being brought back down to planet Earth. So it's showing us very clearly that we have this essence, this life force that is separate but normally inhabits the body. She's not the only one. I had an 8-year-old tell me exactly the same thing, only he went into a mantid form for a time. He said, I evaporated into the mantid form, and then I came back to my physical body. And they described the ball of light.
And then that poses the question of, these life after death experiences that people have had. So, we've got to start asking, what is the reality? What aren't we being told? Because, when you start hearing this sort of information, all of a sudden, a lot of belief, and probably not everyone's, but a lot of belief is you're human, you're the bag of bones and meat, and that's what you are. And when you die, I guess some people think, well, there's not an afterlife. That's just, you die. I guess most religions even say your spirit, and that's major religion. So, I think the way the story has been sort of taught, it probably hasn't been taught quite right. I think it's, you're not the body with a spirit. You're a spirit and you're in a body. You're having the experience in a body.
Well, what is more and more obvious in terms of what I've found very compelling is when you get children talking about incarnating into planet Earth and remembering their life prior to that, talking about coming from another planet. As I was mentioning to you earlier, 10-year-old explaining this is his first Earth life, and he came from another planet. He was in a blue humanoid form, and he remembers being a will-o'-the-wisp, a spirit. He said, I looked at what life I wanted on this planet, almost like he decided what kind of life he wanted. And then he said, and then I found myself in mummy's tummy. So he was talking about the whole reincarnation process, a 10-year-old explaining, that in that way. And the bottom line is that a lot of the children now that are being born, what I call the more advanced human, is remembering their past lives, whether it's been on planet Earth before or another planet, or even another dimension, by the way. And I write in my book, The New Human, of a young man who's an artist in Sydney. And he told me that where he comes from was another dimension. And he'd come into this dimension with a mandate or a mission, if you like. I remember a 10-year-old English boy telling me that he arrived in his present form through a portal in the sun, was his way of explaining he came from another dimension. Now, these are kids talking about this. This isn't not adults who've read lots of books, seen talk shows on this or whatever. This is their understanding of themselves. And you have to say to yourself, why would they say that?
Yeah, children have got active imaginations, but they don't say that. And, and this is, I guess it comes to, because I know you've been doing a lot of research on indigo children. So are these the indigo children you're referring to?
Well, there's different programs that I've discovered. There's not just the indigos. Some metaphysicians say there are others called the crystals. Some are more healers. The indigos are the ones, the rebels. They're changing the system. They've come and incarnated to change the system. Whereas some of the ones like the crystals, the golden, they've all got different mandates. Some have come in as healers. Some have come in to help with the pollution of the planet and whatever, or earth energies. So what that really means is just that they're coming in with different frequencies and different awareness, depending on what the job is that they've got to do. But also, as you know, we're inclined to look at these different children, which are also being diagnosed as ADHD, Asperger's, some forms of autism, dyslexia, etc., and we're thinking that they are in fact in some way dysfunctional. But what I've discovered is that we have not understood them. that they are in fact wired differently. And one of the indicators for me, particularly with ADHD, was I was speaking to a ufologist in Hong Kong called Neil Gold, who wrote the book Close Encounters of the ADHD Kind, because he discovered as a middle-aged man that he'd been experiencing reality in a far more complex way than the rest of, his peer group. And he didn't understand that. He only understood later that that was due to his ADHD, which he retranslated as always dialed into higher dimensions. So our kids that are coming in are wired differently because it's stopping them being wired into the programming of 3D that limits that awareness. So it's almost like these intelligences have said, they're not getting it because they're being programmed out of their multidimensional awareness. We've got to stop that. So what can we do to stop them being programmed? Well, we'll wire them differently so they can't be so programmed. And what do we do with ADHD? To slow them down, we stick them full of Ritalin. What we're doing then is making them back into the old system. And that's why I think that this is, and that, Asperger's, that's another one. We've discovered with some autistic children that they're actually telepathic, and Dr. Diane Powell has been doing certain research to find out the fact that she's got some subjects that are autistic that in fact are telepathic. So there's another ability. Again, the reason they're behaving differently is if you've got a child that can read you and read when you're frustrated, read when you're this, that, and the other, what are they going to emulate? They're going to emulate what they're reading. And I remember a woman telling me in an email that she's got a little baby girl. And she said right from her birth, she was telepathic. And she said, Mary, we knew she was. Everyone around, she'd pick up information.
Was it two-way telepathy? So if she could tell the daughter was telepathic, could they communicate that way?
It wasn't like that for her mother. What she knew, what the daughter was doing was coming out with what the mother was thinking or those around her.
Yeah, okay.
And her biggest issue was the child was now 3 years old. And she said, Mary, it's getting very tiring to monitor your thoughts all the time because your daughter's picking him up. But there are communications between siblings. And I remember a young man many years ago saying he remembers his sister saying to him, they used to, both of them, communicate telepathically until his sister said to him, stop being lazy, start talking, because that's the only way they did it. So we have to understand that a lot of these kids are telepathic. And I've had indicators of older children that have said, one of them, I remember a 13-year-old saying, she told me about it. She said that her teacher would be talking. And she said, but Mary, what she was thinking was different to what she was saying. And often what she was thinking wasn't very nice.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah. So you got to be careful. So because you've done a lot of research, I believe it's over 3,000, you've researched over 3,000 clients with regards to the indigo children or the crystal children. What are the main characteristics or abilities are you finding that they have? And have they connected telepathically to yourself?
Not in that way, but they will read you. I remember one 9-year-old who just said to his dad, who was chatting to me from the US, I'd like to speak to Mary. And so I said, okay. I said, why do you feel you want to speak to me? He said, it's because of your frequency.
Okay.
And then he proceeded to tell me that he was from Orion. He was a light physicist on Orion, and that he dealt with time travel technology, and that he found the scientists on this planet really rather stupid. And the only one that had any kind of real knowledge was Nikola Tesla. And that's that. And he said, but that's still very limited. But when I getting to the characteristics, and obviously in the New Human, I go into them. One is that they know they're not from here, that their family is often the star beings. Their bodies feel too dense. They struggle with the limitedness of humans. They will say they're so limited, often very primitive or barbaric. They will know their mission, their purpose. They will say, I've come here to do X. I mean, I remember a 17-year-old Kiwi young man telling me that he was an Arcturian ambassador, and his job to this planet was as an ecological engineer. He was coming to create new habitat on this planet that was in harmony with the planet, for example. But he understood very well why he'd come in. They are very aware that they're being visited by the family, the star family or whatever. They will talk about the different beings that work with them, that teach them things. They will talk about going to on spacecraft to learn certain things, like complex subjects, being taught how to use their abilities, levitation, the third eye, all those kinds of things. So they are able to do this as well. They're precognitive.
Wow. So do you think the reason that they're having these abilities, or, I don't want to say the word agenda because that almost sounds like it's something, malevolent, which obviously it isn't. But do you think, the reason or the point of these abilities is to, I guess, improve, the environment, the living conditions on planet Earth?
Absolutely. I'm sure that there are many programs for this planet, and that's why we've got the different kinds of new humans that are coming in. And this has been happening over I reckon, the last 100 years probably, but it's been accelerated since the atom bomb, because that's when a lot more craft started to be present, let us know they were around, saying you can't do this. One of the major things they're told on the craft is you've got to stop doing this to your planet. You've got to start looking after your planet. You can't use technologies that are destructive because you don't realize that it affects us on a dimensional level when you're, with a lot of the technology. So it's like we're too immature spiritually. And so there's been almost like a rapid expansion or acceleration of upgrading human spirituality. And as you know, that many people who've had experiences, what seems to the surveys are indicating more and more from these surveys that we've done, particularly with the Free Organization, which is a scientific organization. The survey was orchestrated by two. The chairman, one's a neuroscientist, Dr. Bob Davis. The other one was Dr. John Klimo, who is a professor of psychology for 40 odd years. The 600 questions, what we discovered was, with these questions, that people admitted ultimately a psycho-spiritual transformation of changing consciousness, a whole new focus in what was important to them from materialistic values, changing their diet, changing the way they live. And 85% of those surveyed were admitting to this transformative process where it had completely changed them in terms of their life focus, their understanding of spirituality, etc., etc. So if you want to know the mandate or the agenda, well, that's a pretty clear agenda as far as I'm concerned.
And so it must be quite confronting or surprising for the parents. So, I mean, you're coming across these children that just are coming up with these incredible sentence. When you talk 2, 3, 4-year-olds, or even the 10-year-olds, when they start talking about, I've been put here to they're talking about time travel or whatever it may be. As a parent, I mean, how do the parents react when they hear to this? I mean, what do they say to you?
Well, it's a good question. And more I'm being resourced by parents, educators, psychologists that are open to this. In fact, yesterday morning, I did a workshop, if you like, over the internet with a group of parents. And it's because of called the Conscious Youth Program. And it's run by a lady in America. And she got the parents that have these children, because she's actually providing a webinar with these children to talk to one another so they don't feel so isolated and alone. But the parents want support too. And they're saying, how do we support them? How do we make sure that they, are not shut down, that they can do what they've come here to do? So not only are they connecting with one another, but just asking for, advice or if you like, tools to support their children. And one of the main ones is when they come out with this, what do I do with it? And I say, all you do is listen, because they know what they've come here to do. and support their reality and experience with that reality, so that they don't get confused, because they may not be able to talk about it at school and with anyone else. You're their main resource. And as long as you support that, then they will feel okay within themselves. They'll only become confused if, they go to school and talk about it and then get people shooting their children, laughing at them. And that's happened. I mean, in my book, both in Awakening, Tracy Taylor told me at 5 years old, she remembers going on spacecraft, talked about it at school, and they all laughed at her. So she just shut down.
It's just so far out the norm. Yeah.
But she didn't see that. This is the thing, Tim. She didn't know it was out of the norm. She thought everybody had those experiences.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, you would, because you don't know any different. That's your worldview. You just assume it. So do you know if they can, essentially communicate or still have that connection interdimensionally, assuming that is part of, perhaps some of their abilities?
Absolutely. One of them was a 7-year-old who told me that he came from the 9th dimension, that he regularly traveled to the 7th dimension, that the grey beings could only go as far as the 6th dimension, by the way. And he said he could go through portals into 2 other planets as long as he knew their mathematical number. What he means by that, of course, is the frequency, because numbers are frequency. So, and he said he could do that through the rooms. So he would pick a particular room. It acted as a portal, which would then take him to the planet that he wished to go to. Now, this is a 7-year-old telling me this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's that's not what most 7-year-olds, even when they, creative with imagination, they don't come up with, details like that, especially because, and I think what's also given it credibility is when you look at, I guess if you look at the spiritual things, they talk about, your thought frequencies and what was it? The law of attraction. That's it. The law of attraction. So whatever your thought frequencies are is what you're going to attract. And you talk about, near death experiences, I guess heaven, whatever it may be, essentially different frequencies. So when you have a child who's 7, then saying the same thing, you sort of think, well, hang on a minute, this is sort of making sense. And I think for me, I'm one of those people, if it starts resonating with me, I'm inclined to, sort of give it a lot more credibility and think, yeah, you know what, I reckon they could be talking the truth here. And because why 7-year-olds don't talk like that?
You're a dad, you know that. I'm a mother and a grandmother. I've got 5 grandchildren. I know what the average kind of conversation is in normal conversation, and when one of them's imagining something or telling a story against someone speaking a truth that they're coming out. And the interesting thing is the detail that they will go into, which again puts it aside from imagination or whatever. And the whole point is, why are they telling you? They're telling you because it's part of their experience. This is the important thing here. And for me, the concepts are so complex that they're talking about as well. It's not like, they're watching talk shows, they don't read books on this stuff and quantum physics and whatever. And I remember the 8-year-old telling me that what he was learning on the spacecraft with other children, plus some children that didn't look human. And I said, how do they look different? He said, well, their eyes are different. That's how he knew they weren't the human ones. And he said he was learning how to use his mind to create things and whatever, and learning complex subjects. And I said to him, what kind of complex subjects? And he said, too complex for you to understand.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for that. Dearie me. So do you think, I guess back in the day they talk, or not even back in the day, it still goes on, but they talk about how, you had these abductees that were, taken away onto an aircraft and medical tests were done on them. And they said that they had babies, or perhaps they were hybrids. Are those hybrids they talked about, 10, 15 years ago, or not even that long ago, do you think they may be somehow related to the indigo children, or maybe the consciousness aspect somehow transferring over into new humans? Is the DNA, do you think, changed to allow that to happen?
I think there's many different levels of hybrid. And I'm coming to understand that although many people women have the missing pregnancies and then get taken up on board craft to see their hybrid children, and it may be a hybrid mantis human, feline human, grey, or a real mix of 2 or 3 or whatever. The children that are being born, I suppose what I really want to say more than anything, first of all, is that we're all hybrids for a start. My research, I feel, I would say, for me anyway, what I've looked at is that we are an intelligently designed species. There are molecular biologists that admit to it. There are whistleblowers that admit that we have been created from indigenous and from these star beings that have been visiting us that were called the gods, which they weren't. They were just using their DNA with ours to create Homo sapiens sapiens. And a huge amount of testimony now to say this is the case from Francis Crick, who was co-founded the DNA molecule, etc., etc. So when people say, oh, you know, are the hybrids coming to take over the world? Well, I said, we've already done it. We're hybrids and we've already taken over the world. So what's the problem? We are being upgraded to become more aware, for sure. And these are hybrids that we're seeing as different programs like the Indigos or whatever. And what's happening is, so they're hybrids, but there's hybrids on board craft which are more obvious, the connection between other species and humans, from feline humans, you know, right through to reptilian humans to whatever. But there are many of those now that are connecting to the word hybrids and will tell me, I know I'm a hybrid. And I'm meeting them, both adults and young children, that connect to that. And they'll say, I've got more of this particular species in me. Just like the little 8-year-old said he was part mantid, part human, for example. Wow. He was aware of it, you know, and that's his family. And they will say, that's my family.
Yeah. And do you think that the reason, I guess, essentially we're being upgraded is, as you mentioned, so we are more aware, but is that also so we look after the planet better?
It is absolutely about our consciousness being raised so that we understand the consequences of what we're doing and how we are connected to everything. Because that's the one thing that comes out when people get awoken or, you know, become awake or activated, is they start to see through their consciousness how everything is connected. We're connected to the planet. We're connected to the animals, to the plants. Everything is the consciousness. And, you know, when you've got an 8-year-old telling you that he communicates with animals and that he's come to show us how important animals are and how we should treat them with respect and whatever, is that everything is connected. And we are, as the indigenous peoples already will say, they have respect for the land, for plants, for animals. We've lost all of that.
Well, this is old knowledge, because this really isn't new knowledge. This is old knowledge. We've just sort of forgotten about it. Because, again, as you said, the indigenous, peoples of Australia, for instance, you know, we I think a lot of their belief system is that we, you know, as human beings, we've come to the planet and our responsibility is to look after the planet, and that we are all one and everything is connected. So none of this is new. It's really old.
It's because Western society has lost their connection, their spiritual connection to what we are and how we're connected to everything. And this is what we're being reminded of, is that we, you know, in the quantum universe, we are connected to everything, including the planets, including everything, whether you see it as sentient or not. It's all just energy, and we're part of that energy. We're just more conscious of ourselves than other things. And that's what really has been, by activating their multidimensional, making them more awake as they're being born, who they are, what they are, where they're from, what their mandate is, means that they can get on with helping to shift consciousness on this planet. And that's what's been going on as their DNA, also the dormant DNA, is being activated as well. So more and more people, as their DNA gets activated, they're connecting more to their star family. So you'll get somebody saying, I think I'm from the Pleiades, or I think I'm from Arcturus, or I think I'm from Andromeda. What that means is that their DNA from that particular star system is being activated, and they have this knowing that they're connected to these. And this is because they want us now to evolve to a point where we can become part of the galactic community, because we're not far off joining them. but we need to be, if you like, spiritually advanced enough to take that responsibility on. Otherwise, at the moment, we're really quite barbaric. We still go and kill people we don't like, or because they've got a different color to us, or we want to take over their wealth. And I mean, this is all really primitive stuff. So, you know, we've really got to start growing up and realizing that we're all connected and there's no one better than anybody else, and that we're all here to honor each other and care for one another. This is the big message.
Yeah, and that's it, because, and again, depending on you know, who you watch or you look at YouTube or whatever it may be, you know, I get a sense more that the vast majority of people having experiences or report experiences with you know, extraterrestrial lives, extraterrestrial beings, it's more loving, it's really good it's not a negative. You know, if I remember rightly, you know, probably 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when people would talk about alien abductions, it was, you know, well, the movie Fire in the Sky Hollywooded up that, you know, Travis Walton's experience, made it really negative. But actually, it seems that most experiences nowadays are saying, although, you know, it is quite traumatic if you're not used to it. However, it actually wasn't, the intent wasn't to traumatize. It was actually loving messages and positive messages coming through.
It was absolutely right. What they described was that the problem, because of the fear, was like an animal that's fearful. You had to anesthetize it to stop it from hurting you or hurting itself. They described that the greys are often very fragile, and that if they went to pick us up, they would be ones that would be damaged because of the fear. So that is why they would take them in an altered state. And that was the reason, until they were actually accepting and knowing it's okay. They wouldn't fight it anymore. They didn't need to be anesthetized, and they would go then consciously. And many of those now that are having experiences communicate. They'll actually have conversations and they'll say, I see the presences, they're around me, you know. They'll see orbs of light, which are consciousness, which the orbs of light, I believe, spirit, what we look like when we're spirit is an orb of light. And people are seeing those as well. They're seeing energy fields. And as I say, we're aware that they're going on craft and doing things on craft, quite consciously remembering that they're doing things with these beings, which they call the family. And that's, you know, they'll say to me that this favorite one is, I just want to go home. And home certainly isn't planet Earth.
No.
You know, that is such a powerful one. I want to go home. I hear that so many times because it doesn't feel home here.
Yeah, and is that when they're under hypnosis with you and you're doing the regression with them?
Absolutely. Anything that stills you to a point of becoming more aware and connecting to consciousness, and the intent that you have, you know, in the C5, the intent is I want to connect with you. And we know that they respond, that when the intent is pure, then they will respond. But there are many ways people wake up to their contact. And it may be through a near-death experience. They will find that their consciousness has shifted and they start to see spirits and orbs and other beings and what have you. It may be through a healing experience that they've had that this accelerates their awareness. A shamanic experience, they may take ayahuasca and that shifts them into that awareness. It may be through doing martial arts where they're connecting to the chi and what have you, which becomes a more spiritual. So there are many different ways that they may activate that higher awareness. It isn't all coming from seeing a craft. It may literally be because of some spiritual practice that they're doing that opens them up, raises their frequency. It's all about frequency. And once you've got the higher frequency, you're connecting to more and more of the greater reality. So all of those different ways, out of body, remote viewing, all of these different ways can activate that higher awareness.
And I find that really interesting because, I mean, essentially, I mean, as we're talking about, you know, with the Indigo Children, essentially they're being upgraded. So they've got more conscious awareness of these abilities. But it almost sounds like the reality is we can actually all, I guess, to an extent, we have these abilities. We just don't use them, or we've never been taught to use them. I guess, you know, it's like anything with a muscle. If you don't lift weights for most of your life and then you start lifting weights, it's going to be really tough. But if you've done it all of your life, it's going to be a lot easier. So, people with backgrounds with lots of, I guess, spiritual, meditation, whatever it may be, essentially, for them, it's probably easier to tune into this sort of stuff.
The reason that Western society struggles to become, to activate that part of themselves, we've all got it. Every single one of us on this planet can do all of that, but we've got to want to, and we've got to be aware if we've been, I call it, programmed out of it. Because at the moment, we've got a psychology that doesn't own that we're multidimensional. It just says, unless you can touch it, feel it, see it, hear it, ain't real. Well, immediately you're shut down if you're experiencing other things. Oh, well, I can't experience that because I'm crazy. If this happens, then I must be crazy. And it's that programming that stops us accessing and trusting our intuition.
Yeah, and I think this is probably where we get unstuck a bit, because in the, Western industrialized countries, we do rely on science. And I think science is great. It certainly don't have anything, bad to say about science. I think it's great. But science only measures the material, and really what we're talking about is not material, and therefore, if they say, look, we need to test it and then replicate those tests to get these same results, it's probably not going to happen, but it doesn't mean it's not real.
Well, I'm going to give you a stat that I think has been the reason ufology has struggled to honor witness testimony, not only because some of it may not be conscious, but some of it, of course, is only revealed through hypnosis. We've discovered through these surveys that only 25% of it is physical. The rest, 75% of this experience is non-physical. So in other words, you're not always taken physically. You're taken out of body to have the experience. And that is the reason why traditional nuts and bolts ufology has struggled to try and validate it, or even want to explore it, because it's been too, if you like, too weird, too much out of the box, and they haven't been able to give it as much credibility as it should do, because it's only 25% that's physical. But with that physical stuff, marks on the body, shaved areas, implants, for example, this kind of thing. But there's one other thing, Tim, that's really important, because I work as a therapist, and I know that if you've had a profound experience, it changes the way you think, it changes the way you behave. You manifest whatever it is that you've experienced through art, through your behavior. So many after contact start to do strange artwork, unusual artwork, start writing strange symbols, strange scripts, start creating different kinds of music, start coming out with what we call these light languages or star languages. Never done it before. All of a sudden, they start doing all of this stuff. What do you think that's telling you? Something real happened, guys, because you don't do that after a fantasy. You only do that if something profound has occurred to you. There's your evidence.
Absolutely. And I'm for me to believing, I think it comes in all shapes and sizes. So look, in terms of nuts and bolts, I definitely think that's that is experiences, or that is a part of it. Whether the aliens have been here, I guess, in the Earth or visiting planet Earth, probably. Are they from another planet? Probably. Are they extra dimensional? Yeah, probably.
I think the important thing to understand it is, first of all, keep an open mind about all the data that you get, no matter how it stretches you, no matter how it makes you wonder about what reality is, whether it's someone describing a parallel universe, a different timeline. It could be a whole range of things. Just because you may never have come across it yourself or never heard of it yourself doesn't mean it isn't real. I always remember many years ago being interviewed for breakfast television. And I remember distinctly the presenter saying to me, so then do you believe them then? Do you actually believe them? And I said, well, let's put it like this. They're very hard media sometimes. I said, let's put it like this. I said, I've never been to Alaska. I said, but if enough people have sent me pictures, talked about their experiences going to Alaska and what have you, I may never go to Alaska, but I've got to believe Alaska exists.
Exactly right. Exactly right. That's it. Just because you haven't seen it yourself doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I mean, you know, and I hate to throw it in here, but you know, the Bible. A lot of people believe the Bible. They would never physically sit. I'm really pushing it. I don't. So no offense to anyone that's religious. That's not the intent here. But but a lot of people believe in it, and they probably haven't seen, God or Jesus or anything that's happened in it. So once again, I'm not trying to offend anyone here. That's not the intent. But I'm just trying to get.
I'll just add to that. There's a joke that's actually true, and it was about a guy who'd taken a picture of a UFO by a church steeple, and he'd seen the UFO, and he'd got the photograph. So he goes into the church, and he wants to know how big the craft is. So he goes to ask the priest, "I've got a photograph here, and I want to know how tall your steeple is because it's a photograph of a UFO." And so the priest says to him, "You don't believe in UFOs, do you?" And the guy says to him, "Well," he says, "you believe in God, but at least I've got a picture of mine."
There you go. Exactly right. So, yeah. All right. What I do, Mary, I'll wrap it up there. So thank you so much. And I've got to be honest, I could just keep talking because, we had a bit of a chat beforehand. We've had a good chat now, and I could easily keep going. But I'm conscious, you're a very busy lady. And I thank you so much for, giving me some of your time today. It's so appreciated.
Tim, it's been an absolute pleasure anytime. And thank you for doing what you're doing, because it's so important that these kinds of ventures really make a huge difference to people listening who are having things happen or just wondering about the whole topic. So thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you very much. It's very much appreciated. So thank you, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it today. I know I had a really, really great time. I really enjoyed talking with Mary today. She's just an absolute fountain of knowledge, a real wealth of knowledge. She's groundbreaking in what she's doing. If I'm sure if you're watching this, you've probably watched other YouTube videos with Mary on. Keep watching them. We're just trying to get the message out there and really talk about this subject, which, I find very interesting. I just think it needs to be talked about more just to make it a bit more normalized so more people talk about it. But thank you so much, and have a great day.